in this community. Gaurvani and I have so many friends here in this community, so thank you so much. And in particular, he's very inspired to do a new project called Kirtan Mumbai with Baldev and Meghna. So I wanted to ask for all of your prayers for a great tsunami of ecstatic kirtan to take place, to explode out of Mumbai in the name of Kirtan Mumbai. So if you could all please say a little prayer for the tsunami of Kirtan Mumbai. Hare Krishna. So grateful to you. Thank you. So today is the disappearance day of one of the great associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, whose name is Lochan Das Thakur. He's a beloved disciple. He was a beloved disciple of Narahari Sarkar and the author of Chaitanya Mangal. And he wrote many songs about the mercy of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda that Srila Prabhupada used to sing, like Nitai Guna Maniyamai, Akroda Paramananda Nityananda Ram. And they're very merciful. They are the essence of all incarnations. The specific significance of these incarnations is that they introduced a process of chanting and dancing that is simply joyful. My dear brother, I request that you just worship Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda with firm conviction and faith. If one wants to be Krishna conscious by this process, one has to give up his engagement in sense gratification. One simply has to chant Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, without any motive. My dear brother, just try and examine this. Within the three worlds, there is no one like Lord Chaitanya or Lord Nityananda. Their merciful qualities are so great that upon hearing them, even birds and beasts cry and stones melt. But Lochan Das regrets that he himself, he says, I am entrapped by sense gratification. So he's saying even stones melt and birds and beasts cry, but he says he himself is entrapped by sense gratification. So humble, right? Since I have no attraction for the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, then Yamaraj, the superintendent of death, is punishing me by not allowing me to be attracted by this movement. Haribol. So now maybe we can sing this beautiful song responsively. Parama karuna pahu dvijana nitai Gora Chandra Parama karuna pahu dvija nitai Gora Chandra Sabavatar Sarasi Ramani Kevalaya Nandakanda Sabhayavatar Sarasi Ramani Kevalaya Nandakanda Bhaja Bhaja Bhai Chaitanya Nitai Sujidha Visvasa Kori Bhaja Bhaja Bhai Chaitanya Nitai Sujidha Visvasa Kori Visayacharya Sera Se Majiya Muke Bola Hari Hari Visayacharya Sera Se Majiya Muke Bola Hari Hari Dekore Bhai Tribhuvane Nai Mana Dayala Data Dekore Bhai Tribhuvane Nai Mana Dayala Data Pasupaki Jore Pasana Vidore Sunitara Gunagata Pasupaki Dore Pasana Vidare Sunitara Gunagata Samsara Majiya Rohila Pariya Depadena Hiloasa Samsara Madhya Rahile Pariya Sepadena Hiloasa Apanakarama Bunjai Samana Kahe Lochana Dasa Apanakarama Bunjai Samana Kahe Lochana Dasa Paramakaruna Pahudvi Jana Nitai Gora Chandra Paramakaruna Pahudvi Jana Nitai Gora Chandra Sabhavatar Sarasiramani Kevalaya Nandakanda Sabhavatar Sarasiramani Kevalaya Nandakanda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Jaya Radha Gopinata Radha Gopinata Radhe Jaya Radha Gopinata Radha Gopinata Radhe Jaya Gopal Nachi Jaya Gopal Nachi Jaya Gopal Nachi Jaya Gopal Nachi Gopal Nachi Jaya Gopal Nachi Jaya Gopal Nachi Jaya Jaya Goranita Jaya Goranita Jaya Goranita Jaya Goranita Goranita Jaya Goranita Jaya Goranita Jaya Gor Prabhupada 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 Jai Jai Prabhupada Jai Jai Prabhupada Prabhupada Jai Jai Prabhupada Ananta Lila Pravishtom Vishnupad Paramansa Pariprajakacharya Astatara Satashi Srimad Abhay Charna Ravinda Bhakti Vedanta Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shikuru and Sri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 6, text number 17, Perusha Sukta confirmed. Svadisnyam pratapan prano, Svadisnyam pratapan prano, Svadisnyam pratapan prano, Disnyam pratapan prano, Bahischa pratapatyaso, Hischa pratapatyaso, Bahischa pratapatyaso, Hischa pratapatyaso, Evam virajam pratapams, virajam pratapams, Evam virajam pratapams, virajam pratapams, Tapatyantar bahipuman, Tapatyantar bahipuman, Tapatyantar bahipuman, bahipuman, Swadisnyam pratapan prano, Yam pratapan prano, Bahischa pratapatyaso, Bahischa pratapatyaso, Evam virajam pratapams, virajam pratapams, Tapatyantar bahipuman, Tapatyantar bahipuman, Swadisnyam pratapan prano, Disnyam pratapan prano, Bahischa pratapatyaso, Bahischa pratapatyaso, Evam virajam pratapams, virajam pratapatyantar bahipuman. Please check. Bahisnyam pratapan prano, Samviradam pratapam, Bahipuman, Vadisnyam pratapan prano, Vadisnyam pratapatyaso, Evam virajam pratapam, Tapatyantar bahipuman. Sadisnam pratapan prano, Isnam pratapatyaso, Virajam pratapam, Tapatyantar bahipuman. Vaishnavis? One of you like to chant? Visnam patapan prano, patapan taso, Evam virajam pratapam, Ananta paripamam, Swadisnyam, radiation, Pratapam, by expansion, Pranaha, living energy, Bahi, external, Cha, also, Pratapati, illuminated, Aso, the sun, Evam, in the same way, Virajam, the universal form, Pratapam, by expansion of, Tapati, enlivens, Antap, internally, Bahi, externally, Puman, the Supreme Personality. Translation: the sun illuminates both internally and externally by expanding its radiation. Similarly, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by expanding his universal form, maintains everything in the creation, both internally and externally. Please repeat. The sun illuminates both internally and externally, by expanding its radiation. Similarly, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by expanding his universal form, maintains everything in the creation, both internally and externally. Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. The universal form of the Lord, or the impersonal feature of the Lord, known as the Brahma Jyoti, is clearly explained here and compared to the radiation of the sun. The sunshine may expand all over the universe, but the source of the sunshine, namely the sun planet, or the deity known as Surya Narayan, is the basis of such radiation. Similarly, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, is the basis of the impersonal Brahmajyoti radiation, or the impersonal feature of the Lord. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 14:27. So the universal form of the Lord is the secondary imagination of the impersonal form of the Lord. But the primary form of the Lord is Shyamasundar, with two hands playing on his eternal flute. 75% of the expansive radiation of the Lord is manifested in the spiritual sky, Tripad Vibhuti, and 25% of his personal radiation comprehends the entire expansion of the material universes. This is also explained and stated in the Bhagavad Gita 10:42. Thus, the 75% expansion of his radiation is called his internal energy, whereas the 25% expansion is called the external energy of the Lord. The living entities who are residents of the spiritual as well as the material expansions are his marginal energy, Tatastha Shakti, and they are at liberty to live in either of the energies, external or internal. Those who live within the spiritual expansion of the Lord are called liberated souls, whereas the residents of the external expansion are called the conditioned souls. We can just make an estimate of the number of the residents of the internal expansions in comparison with the number of residents in the external energy, and may easily conclude that the liberated souls are far more numerous than the conditioned souls. Om Ajnana-timirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Sapadantikam Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavari Paschatya Deshatarane Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhaevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Swasyastu Visvasya Kalo Prasidatam Danyantu Bhutani Shivam Mitodiya Manascha Badram Bhajata Tatuksaje Aveshatam no Matirapya Hoituki. Yesterday, Balaram Shakti Prabhu was so brilliantly explaining and so profoundly explaining that the way the Vaishnavacharyas, Jiva Goswami and the other Vaishnavacharyas, the way they emphasize the Smriti Shastras and the Puranas, and especially Srimad Bhagavatam, to explain who is that Perusha. So this chapter is called Perusha Sukta Explained, but he was explaining yesterday that the one who is glorified kind of rather vaguely in the Upanishads and the original Shruti mantras has been clearly identified in this Srimad Bhagavatam. And in this purport, Srila Prabhupada quotes Bhagavad Gita 14:27, where Krishna clearly says that he is the basis of the impersonal Brahman. And then Bhagavad Gita chapter 15, which is called Purushottama Yoga, is really, really unequivocally explains. I wanted to just read those last powerful concluding verses of that chapter, which make it so clear. He says, Krishna says, beyond both the fallible and the infallible living beings, there is the greatest living personality, the Lord himself, who has entered into these worlds and is maintaining them, right? So it sounds like he's talking about someone else, right? Then he starts speaking about himself. He says, because I am transcendental, beyond both the fallible and the infallible, and because I am the greatest, I am celebrated both in the world and in the Vedas as that supreme person. And then he says, whoever knows me as the supreme personality of Godhead without doubting is to be understood as the knower of everything. And he therefore does what? He therefore engages himself in full devotional service, O son of Bharata. And then this final conclusive verse in that chapter, he says, this is the most confidential part of the Vedic scriptures, O sinless one, and it is now disclosed by me to you. Whoever understands this becomes wise, and his endeavors will know perfection. So stunning, such stunning verses where Krishna himself explains, it's me, it is I, in such a powerful way. So if we accept Krishna as the supreme personality of Godhead, then these verses leave no room for us to doubt who is this supreme Purusha. As this chapter in Srimad Bhagavatam says, Perusha Sukta Explained. That Perusha Sukta is this Sri Krishna, the supreme personality of Godhead. And it's so interesting to me that repeatedly in these verses and in this purport, the universal form is being described as imaginary. Isn't that interesting? Imaginary. I find that so intriguing. What do you think? This is coming out of Krishna's imagination. So what's going on here? We're here seeking the absolute truth, and our acharyas are explaining in thousands of verses and hundreds of scriptures that absolute truth. But here we're being asked to take time out to seriously consider this imagination of the universal form. And also in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna pauses his dialogue with Arjuna, and he exhibits this universal form to Arjuna. And Srila Prabhupada calls this universal form a godless display of opulence. Srila Prabhupada calls it a godless display of opulence. And why? Why is that? So after seeing it, Arjuna is totally shocked. He's overwhelmed. His natural fraternal devotion to Krishna is paralyzed, frozen, and he's apologizing to Krishna for his mistake in treating Krishna, the Supreme Person, so casually in all of their loving dealings together. So why does Krishna take a time out from their conversation for this shocking display from his own transcendental imagination, right? So what I want to talk about in this class is imagination, but we're talking about God's imagination. How inconceivable is that? What is in God's imagination, right? So, so why does he do this? In order for us to try to understand some tiny fraction of his vibhuti, a tiny, as they say in the movies, a tiny cameo appearance, right? Exhibition of his opulences. So, just so we don't misunderstand him as only a limited person, he is a person but he's a person without limitation. And everything that exists is coming from this unlimited person. So what about this idea of imagination? Again, whose imagination are we talking about here? And why should we take it seriously? You know, again, we're looking for the absolute truth, and now we're talking about imagination, but we're talking about Krishna's imagination. So I thought, I thought we were looking for truth with a capital T, right? But now we're talking about imagination. So the first 9 cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam are meant to convince us of the greatness of Krishna, the summum bonum, the supreme person who so kindly reveals his personal pastimes at home in Vrindavan in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. But, and the first verse of the next chapter, chapter 10 of Canto 2, unpacks the 10 categories that are described in Srimad Bhagavatam. That verse says, Atra sargo visargascha stanam poshanam uttayaha manvantar eshanukata nirodho muktir ashrayaha. So the details of his greatness, his vibhuti, are these described in these topics. Creation of the universe, sub-creations, planetary systems, protection by the Lord, the creative impetus, the change of manus, the science of God, returning home back to Godhead, liberation, and ultimately Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the summum bonum. So it seems to me that if the Supreme Person is having an imagination as this universal form, and he keeps speaking about how everything that exists is situated in him, in the different parts of his legs, right? Picture it, right? We've been hearing about this, picture this, in different parts of his legs and his arms, his eyes, and even his back. I don't think any other religious tradition in the world talks about God's back. Have you ever heard that in any other tradition? What's on God's back? So it seems like we should take it seriously and not let our eyes glaze over in reading the 2nd canto, just wanting to jump to Krishna's Vrindavan pastimes in the 2nd canto. Yeah, once I heard some of your godbrother, I forget his name. Anyway, he's a writer. He writes lots of books. What's his name? Starts with a V, I think. No. Anyway, I forget his name. But anyway, he said, I heard him give a class in London, and he was saying that there are actually hooks in the 2nd canto and the 5th canto and the 9th canto to block people who are not really qualified to go further into the 10th canto. So we have to have some determination to get through these discussions of the universal form, the manus, the creations, and take it seriously because Krishna is explaining his vibhuti, his opulences, right? So this universal form is Krishna, the Supreme Person's imagination. And I find it interesting. Don't you find it interesting that he wants to personalize? Krishna wants to personalize these aspects of how he's pervading and sustaining all the universes, right? So he has the impersonal aspect, right? And he says that he is the basis of that impersonal aspect, the Brahmajyoti. But then he has another personal aspect as the Paramatma, where he's traveling with us all as the super soul throughout our whole material sojourn up and down through this material world. And then he has his the Perusha avatars, Mahavishnu, Garbhodakshay Vishnu, Kiradakshay Vishnu. They're all persons. And then he has his supreme personal forms in Vaikuntha, unlimited Vaikuntha planets where great devotees worship Vishnu in so many forms, or avatars like Lord Ram, and ultimately in Goloka, Krishna in Goloka Vrindavan as Bhagavan. So I'm finding it really interesting that he likes to personify himself as the universal form to help us, to conceptualize that everything in existence exists within him, within his universal body. Even things we think of as negative, right? Well, a few verses ago, if you heard the class a few days ago, these are the things that are situated on the back of the Lord. Frustration, ignorance, immortality, envy, misfortune, death, and hell are all situated on his back. What do you think of that? It's interesting, right? So in other words, like maybe I can think if I'm having some difficulties in my life, maybe I'm having some grief or some illness or some misfortune, I can meditate within myself that even these things that I think of as negative in my life are also situated, coming from the Lord, situated in the body of the Lord. I find that personally very helpful. And this is such an inconceivably vast science of the absolute truth in so many aspects. And it's all mostly inconceivable to our tiny little brains. God's unlimited, inconceivable imagination. I don't think any other scriptures in the world talk about this. So this is his imagination. And we can't make these things up with our tiny imaginations, right? We just have to fold our hands and hear deeply and enter into a state of awe, right? This discussion of Krishna's great vibhutis should invoke some sense of awe in our hearts, right? That this is all just a spark of his splendor, the spark of our wonderful Krishna. And rather than keeping this discussion of the material creation all impersonal and rather dry, by Krishna's inconceivable imagination, he wants us to make it personal for our better understanding. His eyes, his legs, all these different parts of the universal form. And to make it, I think, more kind of a picture, right? Make it more pictorial so we can visualize it. You know how they say a picture is worth 1,000 words? So you have a picture, you can see it. So this is like a picture of Krishna's vibhuti. So we can better visualize it as this universal form. And all these different forms, all these different aspects, most of them are personal or personalized in different ways. Yeah. And this personal, traveling with us in the material world, the Paramatma, the beautiful forms of Bhagavan, this is all personal. So I wanted to share with you something that I know a lot of you are scientists here. I'm not, but many of you are scientists here, doctors, scientists, engineers. So I wanted to share with you something that Albert Einstein said about looking at the universe. I think it applies. I think it's important to mention this here. So he said, the most important question you can ever ask is if the world is a friendly place. In other words, friendly would mean kind of personal, right? Like if you have a friend, that friend is a person. So he says that's the most important question you can ask is if the universe is a friendly place. For if we decide that the universe is an unfriendly place, then we will use our technology, our scientific discoveries, and our natural resources to achieve safety and power by creating bigger walls to keep out the unfriendliness and bigger weapons to destroy all that which is unfriendly. And I believe we are getting to a place, so he's writing this maybe in the 1950s, something like that. He says, even then, he says, I believe we are getting to a place where technology is powerful enough that we may either completely isolate or destroy ourselves as well in the process. If we decide that the universe is neither friendly nor unfriendly, and that God is essentially, maybe you've heard this before, this is a famous line from Einstein, that God is essentially playing dice with the universe, then we are simply victims in the random toss of the dice, and our lives have no real purpose or meaning. But if we decide that the universe is a friendly place, then we will use our technology, our scientific discoveries, and our natural resources to create tools and models for understanding that universe, because power and safety will come through understanding its workings and its motives. Do you like that quote? It's nice, huh? It kind of reminds me of what all of you devotees are doing at Govardhan Eco Village. That brilliant scientists are using their intelligence to create ways to help the world be a better place rather than destroy the world, like taking plastic bottles and turning them into petrol. Wow, that's amazing, right? And recycling gray water, black water to use for agriculture. These things are amazing. So yeah, I think that's an important contribution from Albert Einstein. So perhaps this discussion of Krishna's universal form will help us to see the universe as friendly and all coming from the Supreme Person, and maybe inspire our imagination and technology in service to that Supreme Person. So we've been talking about God's imagination. So I'm making the point now that he can also inspire our imagination in amazing ways if we take shelter of him and surrender to him, right? Krishna's astounding vibhuti, his opulences, his personal imagination in the universal form personified in the second canto. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada also talks about how we can, how all we can fathom in this material creation is only 1/4 of the whole existence. Isn't that amazing? So everything we see, all the universes, all the stars, all the planets, all the everything, is only a small 1/4 of Krishna's whole creation. And that most of it, 3/4 of it, is beyond this material world in the spiritual world. Think about that for a minute. Is that amazing? I think we should try to be amazed, right? Try to be in awe of Krishna's wonderfulness and like leave this class being amazed. I was with Gauravani and his friend Prahlad Nishringa yesterday for lunch, and Prahlad Nishringa is an aspiring disciple of Sachinandan Swami, and he said that Sachinandan Swami asked the devotees in one class he was giving, he said, "Do you believe in miracles?" And maybe some devotees thought that was a trick question, and only a couple people raised their hands. So, what do you think? Do you believe in miracles? Raise your hand if you believe in miracles. Are you afraid? One person raised their hand. But think about it, because these are all miracles. These are all miracles of Krishna's greatness. And the fact is, we're seeing miracles every day, right? You walk out of this temple and you'll see a miracle. You'll see like a tree growing out of a crack in a sidewalk, or you'll see some other wonder of Krishna's creation. So the thing is, I think we go through life quite sleepwalking, and we don't realize that there are miracles all around us. Actually, there's another quote, I'm not sure if it's really from Einstein, because some people say it's not from him, but there's a beautiful quote, no matter who said it, that there's 2 ways to live our life. One is that everything is a miracle, and the other is that nothing is a miracle. And then another theologian said something interesting, that the problem with the world is that the world has become disenchanted. But I would say that bhakti, this path of bhakti, has the capacity to re-enchant the world by taking us through these verses, through study of Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, Chaitanya Charitamrita, by evoking a sense of awe, a sense of wonder in our hearts, so that we can go, wow, Krishna's wonderful Krishna. There's a chapter in Krishna book called Wonderful Krishna. And if you read Krishna book, which is Prabhupada's summary of the 10th canto, the residents of Vrindavan, practically in every chapter, Nanda Maharaj, Mother Yasoda, they're all in this state of wonder. Like, wow, wonderful Krishna. He kills another demon, he lifts a mountain, he does all these things, and he's just so wonderful. So I believe that becoming Krishna conscious means to enter into this state of wow, this state of amazement, this state of awe, that Krishna is so wonderful, and I can take shelter of him, and that even though he's the greatest, he loves me so much, even though he's got so many devotees that are better than me. Thank you for coming, Haribo. Try to be in a state of awe today, okay? So yeah, so what about, I was thinking also, sometimes people would use their limited imaginations or limited intelligence in trying to ask Srila Prabhupada questions. And sometimes it was just because they thought, well, he's a Swami and he's supposed to know everything, so I should ask him a really tough question. But people like that would often become like tiny glowworms, where Prabhupada gives the example of the frog in the well. You know the example of the frog in the well? You know that one? The frog in the well? No? So there's a frog, he lives in a well. It's like, maybe it's 10 feet deep, and it's like maybe 5 feet across. And some other frog comes and tells him, oh, you haven't seen the ocean, the Arabian Sea, it's gigantic. And he says, well, is it like 2 times bigger than my well? 3 maybe? No, it's gigantic. It goes all the way across. But he can't believe that, so this is an example of when we try to measure God by our limited perceptions, a frog in the well thinking. Or like a glowworm, like a lightning bug, a glowworm. You can see them at night when it's dark, but as soon as the sun comes out. So people with limited understanding are sometimes compared to glowworms. They're powerful in the dark when there's no light, but during the day when there's real light, then you can't see them, right? So I wanted to share, I know everybody always likes to hear stories of Srila Prabhupada, so I wanted to find an excuse to share some stories of Srila Prabhupada. That, people would kind of play trick the Swami, try to ask him, try to show off their meager intelligence by asking him a really tough question or just speculating about things. So Srila Prabhupada could be so funny, and he could also ruthlessly cut through someone's ego with just a couple of words. So once in New York City, a young man thought he would test Srila Prabhupada, and he actually later became a sannyasi. But at this point, he was thinking, well, this Swami's supposed to know everything, so I should ask him a really tough question. This is sort of before he became a devotee. And so he asked Srila Prabhupada something he thought was a trick question. He said, Swamiji, how many windows are in the Empire State Building? He thought that was really smart to ask Srila Prabhupada that. It's absurd, right? It's crazy. And Srila Prabhupada, like without missing a beat, Srila Prabhupada just shot back. He said, how many drops of water are in a mirage? How many drops of water are in a mirage, you fool? So that was good, right? And then there's another story. I have a very sincere and intellectually brilliant god sister. Her name is Vishaka. And she and her husband Yadubara made all these wonderful films about Srila Prabhupada. And she was an award-winning cinematographer before meeting Srila Prabhupada. So once she was quoting Bhagavad Gita, and she asked Srila Prabhupada, how is it that the moon gives the sweet taste to the vegetables, which is one of the verses in Bhagavad Gita? And Prabhupada was so funny. He just said, why don't you ask him? Just to bring down her intellectual speculation, right? Well, why don't you ask the moon yourself? So here's another one. Once after Srila Prabhupada spoke at Harvard University, a student there asked Srila Prabhupada for his interpretation of the Hare Krishna mantra. He was asking Prabhupada, what do these words mean? And remember, every day when we say the 10 offenses to the holy name, one of the 10 offenses is to not give and it should really say mundane interpretation of the holy name of Krishna, right? That would be more correct, because our acharyas do interpret the holy name, but they don't give a mundane interpretation of the holy name. So in this situation, Srila Prabhupada wanted to bring down the ego of this Harvard University student. And Srila Prabhupada told him, he's asking, what is the meaning of this Hare Krishna? And Srila Prabhupada said, these are proper nouns, Hare, Krishna, Rama. You are an educated young man. You should know that there is no translation for a proper noun. He just cut him down, And sometimes Srila Prabhupada would be asked, are you seeing God? He would often be asked, are you seeing God? And he would answer in so many different ways, depending on the mentality of the person who was asking, which is very, very interesting. So once he was asked that question by kind of a rather proud, kind of loud, bombastic young man. So he says in his loud voice, are you seeing God? Like that. And guess what Prabhupada said? You can't even guess. I mean, I'm talking about the imagination of a pure devotee of Krishna, right? You can't even imagine what he said. So this guy says, are you seeing God? Prabhupada said, no, because you are standing in the way. And then once someone asked that very sincerely, are you seeing God, with a sincere inquiry of the heart? And Prabhupada so humbly answered, he said, yes. And you are also seeing God every day. You're seeing the sunrise, you're seeing the sunset, you're seeing the moonrise, so you're also seeing God. We're also seeing God. So this is so beautiful, isn't it? And so my point is that Krishna's imaginary appearance as the universal form gives us a future hint of how he pervades all things as a person beyond the impersonal Brahman. And that the universe is personified as the universal form, and as a person, that he's a person who's the foundation of all existence, and that the universe is friendly when we see it as coming from him, as Einstein was pondering, right? And that the imagination of the Supreme Person is awe-inspiring and so vast beyond our tiny conceptions, beyond our tiny imaginations of reality or time or existence or God or anything. Everything that is so beyond our limited understanding and imagination. But then this other point I think is so important, that if we can take shelter of Krishna, the Supreme Person, in collaboration with his unlimited imagination and intelligence, we can, like Srila Prabhupada, also access our own unique realizations and understandings of Krishna's greatness, of the universe, and our own identities as well. So I wanted to share with you, in closing here, there's a very beautiful purport by Srila Prabhupada. This is Srimad Bhagavatam. It's very short, only a few lines. Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st Canto, 2nd chapter, 8th verse, and this is the purport. This is, I think, one of the great Mahavakyas, or great statements of Srila Prabhupada, and I think it's on point for what we're talking about here today. So he says, the need of the spirit soul is that he wants to get out of the limited sphere of material bondage and fulfill his desire for complete freedom. He wants to get out of the covered walls of the greater universe. He wants to see the free light and the spirit. That complete freedom is achieved when he meets the complete spirit, the personality of Godhead. Do you like that quote? It's really beautiful, isn't it? That we're all seeking that freedom. And when do we actually find freedom? When we meet that Supreme Person, our dearmost friend. So in conclusion, if we study these 2nd Canto verses about this so-called imaginary universal form, hearing about how the Supreme Person pervades all things in his vast creation of existence, perhaps we can take Krishna's advice to his devotee Arjuna in the 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, and know that all beautiful, glorious, and mighty creations spring from but a spark of his splendor. And maybe we can also access, even today in our lives, a little miracle of this sense of wonder, this sense of awe in loving Krishna and recognizing him in this world. So thank you all so much. Hare Krishna. Any reflections or feedback or takeaways or complaints or questions? You have any complaints? Any questions? Do you think the universe is friendly or unfriendly? Friendly? You agree? Raise your hand if you think the universe is friendly. Thank you. You understood the class. Thank you. You're thinking about it, right? So, any questions? Yes?
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for a wonderful class. I don't have any question, but I like the point that you mentioned, that acknowledging the miracles around us. So by acknowledging daily miracles, like seeing a small plant growing out of a crack or somewhere, also it is connected with the Srila Prabhupada's analogy that how he replied to that one devotee that seeing Krishna as sunrise and moonlight, it is also a miracle.
Seeing Krishna what?
Seeing Krishna as sunrise and in moonlight, it is also a miracle.
Right. That you're also seeing God, right? But we don't realize it. So yeah, it's a nice point, isn't it? Like I think children, children are so charming. We watch them and they can be so fascinated by a mud puddle, right? In rainy season in Mumbai, the kids will be like stomping in the mud and rain. They're so happy. And as adults, we're so jaded. We act like, oh, I've seen it all before. There's nothing new in the whole creation. I've done it. I've seen it. And we just go through life like robots, like on automatic pilot, not noticing Krishna's greatness and his wonders and his creation. So I think it's a matter of waking up, waking up to the living holy name and waking up to Krishna's wonders, and then we can... Actually, Socrates, another great scientist, said that a sense of wonder is the beginning of all knowledge. So if we think, yeah, I'm an adult, I'm so sophisticated, I know everything. Actually, Srila Prabhupada would sometimes say that Krishna consciousness is so nice that even any unsophisticated person can understand it. So he would use the word sophisticated in a very negative way. Like, we're so sophisticated, we think we know everything, and we can't stop for a moment and see Krishna's miracles. So that's very unfortunate. So yeah, thank you for the nice reflection. Anyone else have a question? Or yes, reflection or...
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.
Are you Balaram Shakti? Oh my goodness. I was so intimidated and afraid. I said to Abhay yesterday that how am I going to give a class after yesterday's class? It's impossible. Thank you, Prabhu, for your brilliant insights and making things so clear for us. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. I just have a small reflection. Maybe you could throw some light. Actually, you mentioned about Prabhupada oftentimes not responding to the question as such, but responding to probably the person, his attitude. So it becomes so important that someone who was there contextualizes the answer.
Yeah.
If not, it becomes people take, okay, this was the question and this was the answer.
Yeah.
And you don't know that, Prabhupada, oftentimes we don't answer questions because we answer people because we know the mood and behind that question. Someone is seeking comfort, they are not seeking an answer. Someone is challenging. So oftentimes we don't analytically address the question. We address the intent. But we are ordinary people, so our answers are not going to be documented and presented for the posterity. But when Prabhupada does that, how important it is that someone contextualizes it so that you understand that he was not analytically addressing the answer.
Yeah.
He was not answering. So
yeah, it's so important. People think Prabhupada is so heavy and try to make him into a very stereotyped in a theological box, but he was not like that at all. And I think the point that you're bringing up is very important, and to me, it behooves us that we have, like, what's a quality of the mode of goodness? Transparency. That we have to become so transparent that we can hear Krishna's voice speaking through us. That's a very important prayer. Let me hear what, that's in the Guru Puja. My only desire is to hear the words emanating from your lotus mouth. So if we can become transparent, which means giving up our ego, and then we can hear the voice of Krishna speaking to us, and then we can understand clearly the mentality that people are asking from. And the intention, I was thinking this morning how Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, I think it goes like this, useless questions and absurd inquiries are the great enemies of progress. I think that's the quote. So, you know, we have to be able to discern what's absurd and what's sincere when we're speaking or when we're hearing or when we ourselves are inquiring. So I think it's very, very important to try to become so clear and transparent that we can understand and really help people. And, you know, what is it, the ways of the mode of passion discussions, the mode of ignorance, vada, vitanda, and jalpa, right? So usually in conversation, or maybe when someone's even giving a class, we're just waiting for someone to stop talking so that I can shoot back with my brilliant answer. But that's not helpful. You know, I have to really understand, because someone may be very sincere, someone may be carrying grief, someone may have just lost their mother, or their, you know, some terrible situation. They may be suffering from a cancer, or whatever. But when we shoot back our insensitive answers, it can be very violent, actually. This new sannyasi, Keshav Maharaj, he said something really brilliant. He said, knowledge applied without compassion is no longer knowledge. It is really interesting. Think about it. Because I can quote Krishna's exact words from Bhagavad Gita without sensitivity, without compassion, and I can actually cause violence to someone. You know, someone's crying out of some terrible circumstance, and you're not this body. Why are you lamenting for what is not worthy of grief? And then they can be so broken because of, you know, my misapplication of Krishna's words. So I think I think it behooves us to become that. Like, I'll share one more beautiful story of Prabhupada that I really love. It was a Vyas Puja ceremony, and all the devotees were coming up and making their offerings. Prabhupada, you are the Jagat Guru, you are this, that, all these maybe beautiful and sincere offerings. But this one devotee was sitting right by the base of Prabhupada's Vyasasan, and he was hearing Prabhupada say, after each disciple spoke, this devotee was hearing Prabhupada say, you become. Now you become. Whatever they were offering to him, he was just like boomerang right back at you, as they say. You know, you become whatever you're saying to me. I'm Jagat Guru. Now you become Jagat Guru. You know, so yeah. Can I share one more story? I think it's over time, but I'll share my most favorite story of Prabhupada, if you don't mind. This is really a nice one. So one devotee, he was a new devotee, very new man. He was doing the guarding service when Prabhupada was visiting New Vrindavan community. He was serving as the night guard. He was not a very important devotee at that time, kind of brand new guy. And so it started raining, and he went into the attached garage and was doing his guard service from there. And then he felt this presence behind him, and he turned around, and there was Srila Prabhupada right in the garage. So he offered his obeisances to Srila Prabhupada, and then he turned around and said, Srila Prabhupada, as we all would do, he said, Srila Prabhupada, is there any service I can do for you? And Srila Prabhupada said something amazing. He said, yes, you can go where I will not go. And this devotee was totally shocked, because Prabhupada had just come from Japan, California, Texas, Chicago. Now he's in New Vrindavan, going to New York, London, Germany, you know. But he said, but Prabhupada, you go everywhere. Where is it that you won't go? And Prabhupada said, and here's the most amazing part, the second most amazing part. Prabhupada said, to the future. And then he said, this is the most amazing part. He said, go to the future. And by the way you treat the people there, they will know how much Krishna loves them. Nice, huh? So if you forget everything else in this class, please remember that wonderful story, because you are all people of the future, and we each need to go to the future and show people how much Krishna loves them. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much. Haribo. Haribo. Thank you. Thank you for your nice question. Yeah, imagine that it's all part of Krishna. That's an